Okay, hi everyone. My name is Anton. I'm CEO of Upsilon, and this is another episode of Startup Stories series for our blog. And today I'm super pleased to have Chris Priebe, investor and currently founder and CEO of Zelt. Hi.
Hey guys, I'm Chris. Nice to meet you.
Okay, Chris. So let's talk like just a bit about you and about your story. So how did you get into tech, into investing? So what's your story?
Yeah, so it happened kind of randomly. I studied physics in school, and
Hmm.
definitely knew I did not want to become a physicist. And came to the UK. I'm originally from Germany, and did a master's in finance and started working in investment banking, and that's kind of how I got into tech. So there we worked on advising tech companies on going public mostly, so IPOs, um, and um, and then from then on, I worked a few years in private equity, so acquiring, basically searching and acquiring mostly software companies or in general technology companies. And then I
Hmm.
worked a few years as a venture investor, so also investing in companies, but this time very small, very young companies, and basically giving them some capital to start building their product and acquire their first few customers. And
Hmm.
yeah, that's really where I got exposure to startups. So I would say before founding Zelt, I was more of a finance person. And in VC, I kind of made that jump over to actually, become an operator. Um, and yeah, we just had a lot of exposure to some great companies who invested in startups like Revolut, Brex, Slack, Canva, HelloFresh, Zalando. So lots of 10 billion plus companies, and yeah, just got inspired by the founders and the things that they can do. I think it's more interesting than finance, so that's why I decided to switch.
Yeah, that's a shiny list. So and you said that you transitioned like from like bank investment to private equity investments. How different is the culture like in those places?
It's very, very different. You would maybe think, hey, finance is all the same, and they're all like, these kind of bro culture, and that's not the case at all, actually. So I would say that private equity is a very conservative, very polite, very proper environment. Because these guys, I don't know why it is. Maybe that's a different question. But they are very proper, and most people work there their entire careers. So they people that work there, they've known each other longer than kind of most friends that they have, particularly the seniors. And in banking, it's different. It's very different. It's really kind of this tradition, like this stereotypical culture that you really kind of think of when you think of it. Like it's a bit like bro-like and like lad culture, and it's a bit aggressive, and people love that it's aggressive, and they maybe say a few more inappropriate things than you would definitely not hear in a kind of private equity company. So yeah, very very different culture, and definitely like the private equity culture a bit, quite a bit better.
I see. And moving to venture capital, like it was like just like a thing that happened, or you understood what you're doing and you were aiming there. So how did it happen?
So it was a bit of both. So even when I was already in private equity, I knew that I wanted to do something on my own. I never saw myself jumping or like going up that career ladder in some company. Um,
Hmm.
so I always had that at the back of my head. Okay, I want to do something. I don't know exactly when or where or what. And the jump to VC happened very. So the timing was not for me. So I was approached by Ollie Sumber, the founder of Rocket Internet and Global Founders Capital, the VC arm that basically he's running or was running. And yeah, he made me just a very attractive proposition to join the UK team and lead the UK office. And given that I knew I wanted to start something myself, I knew that private equity is interesting, but you don't really know what's going on in technology, like the new stuff, because usually in private equity you buy
Hmm.
companies that are 15 years old, 20 years old. So really what they have is stuff that was new like 20 years ago. Um, so it's very hard to, I think, get good business ideas when you work in private equity, while when you work in venture capital, you are confronted with ideas on a daily basis, and you also see what works and what doesn't work. So for starting a business, it's great because A, you get to exposure to a lot of different models, and B, also you kind of understand how this whole fundraising thing works. It's not
Mhm.
like magic or something, but you just need to know a little bit about how it works and like what are investors and what are they looking for, and that also helps a little bit.
Yeah, so essentially, like the venture capital was a step towards like founding your own company.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I see, I see. That's an interesting path. Like not a lot of people I hear like going exactly this way. And obviously like this was a help like knowing the system inside out. But being like non like technical founder, you're coming from finance and you're founding like a technical company. Was it fine for you? Did you have like any issues with that, or you know what you were doing already after with your
So I
experience?
knew what I was doing on the product side, and I think to be
Hmm.
good in product, you don't have to necessarily be good.
Hmm.
So I study physics. So technically, on a conceptual basis, I'm very strong conceptually, technically. But I've done some coding in university, but like nothing ever like at work. So I can't really code. I can read a little bit. But it is a handicap. So especially when you want to build anything, technology, like, the bread and butter is code, right? Everything's written in code. If you can't write code, you're dependent on others. That means either you need a co-founder that can code, that doesn't need a salary, or you need to raise money so you can pay others to do it for you. And even when you have the money to pay others, you need to be able to trust them that whatever they do is actually, you know, um, reasonably built so that you don't have to throw it away and then start again half a year in or a year in. So definitely, it's a handicap, um, and you take a bit of a risk because whoever you hire, you will not know for sure that it's going to work out. But it worked out in my case, and 6 months in, we had a small team that I put together full time, and then we kind of transitioned away from the contractors that helped us get off the ground in the early days.
Hmm. So your solution was like overcoming like the trust problem and hiring a CTO like co-founder for you, or it was just like a hired person.
So as a co-founder, I would only work with somebody that I know, or somebody that
Hmm.
I know really well, knows very well, right? There needs to be a certain mutual bound of trust, and knowing that person, right? Either personally or via somebody that I trust. I would have never done it with
Hmm.
somebody. I mean, I was looking for potential people, but A, it's really hard to find somebody who is in the stage of their life that want to take this bet, and B, that is of the caliber that I would accept as a co-founder. Like, it's just a reality. Just for
Hmm.
coding, right? I'd rather pay somebody. And it just didn't happen. I looked, and of course, in my personal kind of friendship circle, there wasn't really any real, real opportunity anyway, because they're all like in hedge funds and private equity and those sort of things. So they're not really useful for me. Um, so I didn't really have another option. So yeah, that's just what I had to go on my own. Not by choice
I
necessarily,
see.
but it also has advantages. So it's not just downsides. But it does make the first 6 months quite a bit harder.
Hmm. And you mentioned like you hired like a team of contractors like for the first period. Like a lot of the founders they try to assemble a core team that their employees and so on. How was your experience with contractors, and is that like what a lot of startup founders do?
Um, yeah, so I think it's definitely common, right? I was actually looking for kind of firms like you guys in the beginning. These kind of
Hmm.
companies that give you a product manager and they have a designer, and they're offshore, so they're a bit cheaper, and they have a whole individuals. But when I started, the kind of boom was still going on, um, and nobody had capacity. Literally, there was nothing. So that option wasn't there. Um, so I had to basically pick them myself, and so then I went through my network and I asked people, "Hey, do you know any contractors that are good?" And one person was recommended to me, and then they recommended another person. And frankly, they did a great job, and it definitely got the ball rolling. And yeah, very lucky that I found them. Of course, it's a bit more expensive, and it's not the same thing as kind of early stage startup employees that really look for that excitement and that experience, and they want the equity and want to be part of that journey. So you know that wasn't
Hmm.
a forever thing, but for the first 6 months, it was definitely the right thing. Because also you don't have to convince them now that this is the next billion-dollar companies. Them not caring about it has both advantages and disadvantages, right? The advantage is if I pay them the money that they ask for, they'll do it, right? They don't ask questions, and their notice periods are short, so that's great. But also, they're never going to get that excitement and that kind of that buy-in that you get from people that really look for this kind of ride with a startup.
Yeah, I see. That's an interesting view. So maybe let's talk more about Zelt. So, how did you like come up with this idea, and what problem Zelt is
Yeah,
solving?
so I mean, really, what I've seen, as an investor, I see like high-level trends, right? So really, like the last decade was really all about like SaaS, right? So before, software was like on these servers that run somewhere in the back of your office, and you had like an IT guy that has to literally take a screwdriver and like switch out the hard drives and all that kind of stuff. So SaaS was like a big revolution from a deployment perspective. So all of a sudden, it was just running the browser, right? And that really that was kind of like the decade before this one. Now this decade is really all about, hey, what we're going to do with all this data, right? And how do we connect all these different systems that we now have? And you can see that very clearly in what's been growing, what companies have been successful. UiPath, fastest growing company like of all time, or like at least fastest company from or to 1 billion revenue or something like that, right? And then workflow automation platforms, all these API tools, API connections, Plate. They're all kind of
Hmm.
really all the same thing. They're just like moving data from A to B and automating processes, and that's really kind of what we're in right now in this decade. Certainly on the business perspective, B2B, and um, a lot of investment has gone into the whole revenue stack. So, there are amazing platforms out there for CRMs, customer-facing things, HubSpot, Pipedrive, Salesforce. Although Salesforce may be a bit clunky now,
Hmm.
like very, very big kind of platforms. You can do a lot of things with it, and you can automate a lot. They're pretty awesome. Um, this really hasn't happened in the people-facing world. And you could argue
Hmm.
modern companies really two things, like it's people and kind of your product and or maybe your customers, right? But product isn't people, but the most important people in the company are your own employees and the customers, right? A lot of investment has gone into that whole customer side of things. Very little has gone into people, um, and most of
Hmm.
the systems out there are really bad. There are no real platforms out there. Workday maybe, but they're already in the big enterprise space, so 99% of people are working for companies that are massively underinvested in people tools, and it has a lot of impact.
Hmm.
So it makes business processes admin very difficult. Um, and then you've had things like COVID and Brexit and remote
Yeah.
work and things becoming more digital, so you need more systems. So it just means that there's a lot of, let's say, computer admin that companies have to do. And really, what Zelt is trying to tackle that and reduce that computer admin that people do on a daily basis, both for admins, but also line managers in companies that don't have to explain how kind of admin processes work. They don't need to do that anymore. Spend less time on IT admin, and basically spend more time at work, focus on the things that are important for your job. Um, or with more automation, I don't know, maybe just go home a bit earlier, right? Depending on kind of what kind of company you are.
Hmm. So, and like as I understood, like for example, Workday is targeting like enterprise companies. You are targeting more small and medium businesses and growing businesses that kind of have their process being established, or they're lacking those processes.
Not so much. So we're more like in the scale up and mid cap market. So sweet spot
Mm-hmm.
for us is really companies between 50 and 5,000 employees. So usually they have some
Mm-hmm.
systems in place, but it's almost always a combination of two things. Either they have an HR system or payroll system, and then they do a lot of stuff manually with like spreadsheets and emails, or they already have a lot of different systems and they want to consolidate them. Um, and they come to us because we're a good option for them to do so. So for example, companies may have an HR system and a payroll system, but they are still managing all their IT by hand, right? They have a new joiner, they literally go on Amazon, they buy the laptop, they ship it to the person, they install any software on it manually, and then they collect it and they wipe it all by hand. And that takes hours, right? And if you add this all up, if you have 1,000
Mhm.
employees, you spend 2,000 hours just on that, while it could be just totally automated. So they can bundle that directly into the HR system, and they don't have to deal with this stuff anymore.
Mhm. I see. And the companies usually like they're very kind of in defense position regarding like the internal data and like people data and privacy. How do you approach it, and like how much do people like question you or care about like what's happening with their data? How do you solve it?
Yeah, so I mean, security and privacy is, I mean, we're probably one of those platforms where it's like almost the most important. Um, we don't hold a lot of data, right? So if you have 1,000 employees,
Mhm.
kind of have 1,000 people records, or maybe 2,000 if you had 1,000 levers like in the last since your inception. If you're a CRM system, you'll likely have hundreds of thousands, so you'll have a lot more records. But the depth
Mhm.
of what we store is much deeper and much more sensitive. So particularly when it comes to identity theft, for example. If you know somebody's name and email, they can't really do much, and you can get this information anywhere anyway. But if you know somebody's
Mhm.
name and address and emergency contact and bank account and all these other things, then you can really trick other people into thinking either you're somebody else, or you can even trick them to thinking that you're actually them. Um,
Mhm.
and so not not leaking data is for us like extremely more than most other systems. So, we've done, for example, our ISO certification much earlier than most other startups because, it's just the right thing to do. We, do pen testing, and, the fact that only, a minimal amount of people have access, production access to our databases, not everybody, right? Very specific people, access monitored,
Mhm.
all those kind of things are very important for us, even from day one. Um, while for other startups, it's more like, yeah, we'll kind of figure out later. As for us, it's a bit of a different story.
I see. Yeah, that's fine. That's pretty normal, I guess. So, can I ask you about like how you attract your like customers and what channels do you use? Because like we've talked and pretty much I've checked your um, social pages. You were like spending a lot of time participating in PR activities like podcasts, interviews, like this. Does this work for you and for Zelt, or it has a different purpose behind like your own pretty much?
Yeah, so I mean, I do have to admit, my LinkedIn is it's not just me posting it there, so not everything you see there is me typing it directly, but some of it is. Um, and yeah, so I think you have to be active in all the channels. I think there are a few secrets out there. Like I think everybody knows about the channels. So at the core, you need to have a good product and a good proposition. And
Hmm.
of course, we do email outbound, we do SEO, not so much paid marketing, except for LinkedIn retargeting. But again, probably everybody's doing that.
Hmm.
We're not doing anything on LinkedIn or Facebook, at least not yet. So it's a lot of a lot of kind of inbound and word of mouth, and then we send emails to people that we think could benefit from our system, and yeah, they just go on a demo with us and sign up.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, well, like your customer profile is pretty defined. I guess that's easy to kind of find those people and yeah, and target them. Yeah, you raised 3.5 million in funding, if I'm correct, from like Village Global, Episode One, and Adopt Ventures. I guess like that your experience as an investors and as an investor helped you a lot, right?
Yes and no. I think actually the first person that invested in Zelt was somebody I did not know before. The
Hmm.
person that made that intro was a founder, and I knew that founder because I was a VC before. but you can know other founders also from being a founder before or from working in a startup where a lot of people become founders. So
Hmm.
mm, yes and no. I think it's not a huge advantage. Um, it's not hard to find out. What's the list of 20 VCs in your town, or who are the best seed investors in your area. It's pretty easy to find out. And frankly, if you have a good profile and a reasonably interesting idea, people will meet with you. Um, so
And
yeah, I think it's not a huge advantage. Certainly, it should never block anybody from trying to fundraise because they have no idea how fundraising works. You don't need to know this at all.
mhm. And what other advice like would you give to founders who just started about like raising funds? So have a clear idea, clear proposition, like contact the VCs. What else?
Yeah, so I wouldn't reach out directly necessarily. You can if you must, but like if you find an introduction somehow, use that. The pitch deck's very important. It needs to have a certain format. It's just because investors look at pitch decks, every day, all the time, and if it's not in a format that they're used to it, then it kind of confuses them, and they need to be
Hmm.
able to find out within 20 seconds whether there's something interesting or not. So they know exactly where the
Hmm.
team page is. The opener is always the problem, right? They know exactly where the market sizing page is and the competitor page, and you always know it's somewhere towards the back, so you just skip there. So if reach out to me if you want to know, hey, what's the best in class deck? Again, it's not difficult. You just need to know. It's always 12 pages and it always starts like this and always ends like this. So make sure you kind of follow all these hygiene steps, and then see if you can have anybody in your network that can introduce you. Because from my experience, the likelihood of closing an investor if it came through a very warm introduction is, I don't know the numbers, but anything between 3 and 10 times higher than if you send an email or reach out to them.
Hmm. Yeah, that's pretty huge. I see. Yeah, thanks a lot. Um, and so, Chris, like, what do you think was like the biggest challenges you faced since starting the company? And if you could, like, would you do anything different, or it would all be the same?
So the challenges change all the time. So the first 6 months was actually the biggest challenge was what we kind of talked about. Like not being able to code and then having to find people that can do it for you, and then trusting them with the
Hmm.
decisions that they make for you. Because some of these things they will stay, what they put in place will stay there for either a long time or maybe even forever. Some of those.
Hmm.
Fundraising, of course. My journey went pretty smooth, but also back then the times were pretty easy. Now it's much harder. Um, so the first 6 months, they're like a different beast. Now, once you pass that period, you need to get your first customers. Um, I mean, ideally you have them earlier, but in our case, that wasn't really possible. So now all of a sudden it's like, holy shit, where am I going to get customers from? And unless you've done marketing or sales before, you kind of have no idea like how that actually works. So you have to kind of
Hmm.
teach yourself all these things. In the meantime, you need to manage the product and the team. You need to do hiring that's super time intensive and difficult. You need to hire people for stuff that you actually don't know about. So you need to kind of figure out how to do that, and if you can find people that can help you. And yeah, so now it's more about how do we find more marketing channels, right? Or maybe we should hire somebody marketing. What channels work better than others? Measuring all this stuff. Now you have customers, like you can do all these analytics now. So you have to put this stuff in place. So this is really different challenge to the first 6 months. And I think that's also the exciting bit about founding a company and being a founder is that the challenges change all the time, which is
Hmm.
when you're an investor, they're kind of always the same. Um, so that I think that's part of the journey. And what do I do differently? Um, Probably small things, but nothing major. I think you know somebody I read this thing once, and it's probably true. I remember what it was, but they said in to each problem that you face, there's like 12 possible solutions, and 10 of them work. So as long as you pick one of the 10, that you're fine. Probably one of those 10 is maybe better than the others, but it kind of doesn't matter as long as you pick the right direction and you just make a decision and go. Right? You can change
Hmm.
things anyway, most things. So um, I think it's kind of like that. Yeah, there could be better maybe options that could have been taken, but all in all, I think you know it's not a big deal. Like, even if like building a $1 billion company is difficult, maybe, but like it's a series of like lots of very simple small things. So just keep doing those small things, and you'll get there. And if one of those is wrong, it's not the end of the world. Like you just fix it and do the next step.
Yeah, I see. 10 out of 12. That's very interesting advice. So Chris, what are your like future plans for Zelt? So where are you going right now?
Yeah, so I mean, the product has really made like quite a jump in the last year after our after we got an additional investment, and now it's really about like testing the waters. Like what's the biggest customer that we can serve? Can we also maybe serve these type of customers that we haven't thought of before? So testing different markets. We have our first few customers in the US and like other markets that we haven't expected. Germany, which is core territory of one of our competitors, Personio. So I think we have customers and markets now that we didn't expect at all. So we need to figure out what does that
Mhm.
mean. Which markets are we going for? Are we going enterprise? Are we going mid market? So there's still a lot of, let's say, fact finding to be done here to understand where should we scale, and increase the depth of our product market fit, right? Because the product market fit varies across different markets. So you have to figure out like where is the biggest fit. And what does that mean also for can we serve companies with more than 10,000 employees? I think we need to find those answers because that will impact quite massively. How you go to market and how you build your organization. So yeah, I think that's for the next 12 months something that we're experimenting a lot with. So sales, marketing, super important, and then our product team, of course, is doing extra hours on a daily basis to keep up with the demands and the demand, not just on like volume and numbers, but also on the product and developing the product. So trying to keep that all in line.
I see. And Chris, like one other questions that is just like more out of the general. So a lot of the companies, especially like tech companies, like are cutting their workforce. There's like general, not very stable like economical situations. Everybody is waiting to like what's going to happen. Does this affect your business, or it's just like automation is the key to solving like these problems in like HR and people management in those companies?
Yeah. So luckily, we're not. I mean, first of all, like nobody benefits from a recession.
Hmm.
There may be some companies that are neutral to it, like maybe McKinsey and Bain. But that there are, it's generally bad for everybody. So everybody hopes that this goes over, and also for fundraising, right? We need the world to return to like a normal and a positive economy. Now we are in a lucky position because we're not an extra system. We're not like yet another tool that you use, yet another spend.
Hmm.
We typically replace multiple systems. That means you'll always save money when you use Zelt, right? Um, at the worst case scenario, you spend the same money. If you don't replace anything, you just want our HR system, you want to replace the old HR system, right? You pay more or less the same thing, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less, depending what you had before, but not a big difference. In vast majority of cases, our customers save money. So you could argue, I mean, we're not around for long enough to see if our sales cycles change, but you could argue maybe it's good for us because saving money is more important when the economy's down.
Hmm.
So yeah, for us, it's definitely not negative, at least not meaningfully. But nevertheless, we're a startup, so we need to fundraise, and we want to do a good fundraise, and we don't want to have investors, sticking their head in the sand as they have been doing it for the last 12 months.
Yeah, hopefully it all will be good for you. Probably one of my last questions is like the AI is like really big thing right now. Everybody's talking about it, like the news popping up each week. Does like Zelt have any plans for AI, or what will be the role of the AI in like HR and people ops?
Yeah, so I think AI will be very important for HR, because there are stats out there that are pretty staggering, but people spend a lot of time basically explaining processes and documents and where to find
Mhm.
stuff to their employees like all the time. And because there's natural churn in companies, right? People spend, maybe 2, 3, 4 years at a company. That means every time they go to new companies, they have to relearn all these processes. How do you file expenses? Where do I get my laptop? My email doesn't work. Where do I need to go? How do I claim, sick pay? How does it work? What do I need to provide? All these things need to be answered all over again to every single employee all the time. and that's extremely wasteful. And the thing is, the information already exists, right? So it's already lying in some documents and some policies somewhere in the company. So AI will be very, especially LLM like ChatGPT. That's a very easy problem to solve with technology like this. So I think this will be the standard very soon. I
Hmm.
don't think it will be a differentiating factor because I think it will just be the new standard, right? You have a smart chatbot kind of on top, and it helps people find the right information. When it comes to business process automation, for HR and payroll and those sort of things, AI will not be the norm because you can't trust it. Things like hallucinations, even if it's 99%, let's say it's 95% correct, business processes usually
Hmm.
have many different steps. So if it's a 10-step process and you have a 5% error rate on each step, actually it's 40% error rate, right? And that's not acceptable. Like, and things like payroll, at least 99.9%, ideally 100. And with the kind of AI things that we're seeing now, this is just not, it's not nearly good enough. It's miles off. So I think, I think when it comes to the business process itself, I think we'll stay in the kind of traditional transactional model of software, which is we know exactly what information is in here, and it's predefined how that information should behave. And it's not some AI making some inference or like some call on or judgment call on what should happen. No, I think AI
Hmm.
will be an overlayer or like embedded in for certain things. For learning and recruiting, it could be useful wherever there's, let's say, a judgment call involved anyway with humans. Arguably, a machine could do it better. Um, when it comes to hard facts and hard data, like have you worked overtime? Are you being underpaid? Are you below minimum wage? Do you have the right certification to do the specific job that you're doing? Those things you will not let to an AI. I think this will stay deterministic, kind of very transactional as it has been. That's kind of my view.
Hmm.
But I think AI as an overlay or like embedded into certain things, I think that will be the new standard very soon if it isn't already.
Yeah, but if not even like making decisions, the AI could help like find the problems or make you suggestions, but not
That's right.
like ultimately make a decision.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that's.
So I think for that, it's super useful, right? So it could flag to you somebody that maybe hey, they should really go on holiday, or they haven't had a review in like 2 years, and they were just
Hmm.
forgotten or something, right? So I think for that, super useful, especially in big companies where let's say you have, imagine you have 10,000 employees. How do you even look at each one of those records, right? It's impossible. Um,
Yeah.
so I think for those things, AI is going to be super interesting, super powerful. But when it comes to then actually like the processes to actually execute stuff, that's I think going to stay
Hmm.
as it is for now.
Yeah, I see. I'm super excited about the future of AI too. So, Chris, that was all of my questions. If you have any final thoughts or anything you would like to say, you're welcome.
I really enjoyed the chat. Yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, if anybody has questions around founding or Zelt or automation, feel free to reach out. I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. We will link your page in the interview also. So yeah, thanks a lot. That was a great talk. Thank you for information and interesting thoughts. And yeah, hopefully see you again.
Yeah, my pleasure. Bye bye.
Bye bye.